have my assistant / friend over here grab the correct Devar Torah, not tomorrow's Devar Torah. I had to have just a special one for you all this week. Wonderful to see everyone. Wonderful to sing with you this Shabbos. This week was a good week for me because I bought cowboy boots. So I think it's a good sign that I'm starting to mesh into the culture here. So that was a big step for me, and I'm glad I took it. So once upon a time, at the beginning of creation, the Torah tells us that there were two great lights that reigned in the sky. The two lights shone equally by day and by night. While this sounds maybe like a beautiful environment for a planet in Star Wars, it quickly became a problem. The moon, who at that time was no different than the sun, spoke up before the Holy Blessed One, saying, "Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, is it possible for two rulers to wear the same crown?" Taken aback by the boldness of God's own creation talking back, God replied curtly, "Okay, if you don't like it, then go make yourself smaller." The moon was furious. "Wait a minute. Just because I brought a legitimate claim to you, I should be the one to minimize myself? That doesn't seem fair." God considered, and not being able to disagree with the point, offered a consolation prize. "Fine. If you make yourself smaller than the sun, you can go rule the skies by day and by night." The moon was not falling for that. It pushed back, saying, "Oh, come on, what good is a lamp in the daylight? My light would be useless." Now, God was really starting to get fed up with all this pushback, so God found something that was sure to end this conversation. "Okay, moon, you drive a hard bargain, but how about I appoint you to be a sign for the seasons and festivals throughout the year? Now, would you like that?" The moon considered this for a second, but could not be shut up so easily. It retorted back, "Well, that sounds nice, but you can't really calculate the seasons without using the sun as well. So yet again, you're not really helping me find my thing. You understand?" Foiled again, God took a moment to think and came up with one last consolation prize. "All right, moon, I'm going to give you the honor of a lifetime. I will add an extra name to a bunch of tzaddikim who will be named after you and your new compact size. We'll call them Jacob the Little and David the Little. These are serious machers I'm talking about." The moon laughed. "Ha! That's sweet, but still not going to make up for shrinking me." God realized the moon was not going to be comforted by any consolation prize. What the moon needed was to see that God was truly sorry for the arrangement and willing to do some act of teshuvah, of repentance. But how to do it? "I got it. I'll arrange for a special sin offering to be brought at the beginning of every month on Rosh Chodesh, when the moon is at its smallest, to atone for forcing the moon to become smaller than the sun." The moon was touched, and while still angry that it had to remain smaller, was willing to be satisfied at this show of penance by its creator. And that is the reason, my friends, why the sin offering for Rosh Chodesh written in our Parsha this week has a special clause appended to it that none of the others have. Chatat ladonai. Not a sin offering to God, but a sin offering for God. Meaning God's self required that regular offering to atone for their action of making the moon smaller. Now that was a nice little story time, wasn't it? Yet behind this origin story in the Talmud about the difference between the two great lights in the sky is a deeper message, I think, about speaking truth to power. The moon in this story was willing to step up and speak to its own creator about a flaw in their design. It saw that something was not sustainable about the arrangement and spoke up to advocate for a change. Furthermore, it could have been satisfied with God's first attempt to fix the situation, or the second, or the third, or the fourth. But he was not willing to back down before God was willing to admit God's culpability and provide a satisfactory act of repair. I know for myself, I have a hard time sometimes speaking up to superiors or to mentors about an issue that needs fixing. And when I do get the courage to bring it up, it is all too easy for me to be satisfied by their first attempt to solve the issue, even if it's not fully satisfactory. I appreciate that they can offer any solution, even if it doesn't fully fix the problem. But the moon is not so easily willing to back down. It has a fearlessness, or at least a courage, in the face of God's intimidating power to speak up for what is right and refuse to back down until a satisfactory solution is found. But looking at the example of God in this story also teaches us about our responsibility to offer real repair and repentance when we fall short. A famous midrash asks about a line from last week's Haftorah in the book of Micah, which instructs us to walk humbly with our God. The midrash is incredulous. It says, how can we possibly think we can walk with God? The solution it offers is that we should do what God is described as doing in the Torah: visiting the sick, supporting the needy, doing justice for the most vulnerable in society. So too, our story from the Talmud asks us to put ourselves in the place of God in this tale. We too create situations that cause conflict. We sometimes try to solve them too quickly without fully thinking through the consequences of our quick response. We appease people without really taking the time to understand how to properly repair the hurt. Our story teaches us that sometimes the most important thing is to understand and admit that something we did really hurt someone. We must listen to their pain and acknowledge it, no matter how hard it can be to hear, and attempt to atone for it through a repair that is commensurate with the hurt. In our Parsha's narrative, just before this commandment to offer a purification offering for God on Rosh Chodesh, we glimpse a parallel story of regular people speaking truth to the most powerful. The text says, "Vatikravna benot Selofchad." The daughters of Selofechad approached, and they stood before Moshe and Eleazar the Kohen, before the chieftains and the entire community. These 5 sisters of seemingly no status or power had the chutzpah to approach not just Moshe privately, but the high priest, the tribal leaders, the entire people Israel, with this issue. Now, if our past experience reading the Torah might give us any indication, protesting against Moshe or God in front of people is kind of a bad thing, I'd say. However, knowing their cause was just and approaching all those people with firmness but humility, they were able to achieve what many others didn't: a favorable response from God and a right to inherit their father's land, which might otherwise have gone to more distant male family. Perhaps we can imagine, if we put these two stories together, that God is learning from the near catastrophe of diminishing the moon and offering a more satisfactory and fully considered response to these women's pleas for the first time. God takes responsibility for the gap in God's laws around inheriting the land and seeks to repair the breach fully and fairly. These two stories give us a window into both sides of a difficult situation: the one who feels wronged and the one who is responsible for correcting that wrong. In our story from the Talmud, we see boldness and forthrightness to demand a more satisfactory solution, even when multiple attempts are made at repair that still miss the mark. In the daughters of Tzalofechad's story, we have the same chutzpah, but with maybe a lighter hand, merging firmness and determination with humility and respect. In both stories, we ourselves gain inspiration and courage to stand up for our righteous needs, personal and beyond, especially when it feels terrifying and impossible. The Midrash states that in this generation of the wilderness, the women rebuilt what the men tore down, meaning they offered an example of righteous action when the men were busy rebelling for their own power and agendas. No offense, men. These stories serve as ways we too can act righteously to create repair in our lives, being willing to identify the systems and relationships that are broken and speak up to change them. If we open our hearts to receive these honest rebukes with understanding, then these interactions can be the heart of Tikkun Olam, repair of our relationships, our societies, and the world. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. Shabbat Shalom.